You've tuned in to the unavailing frequency. But don't touch that dial. We've got you right where we want you.
This is Leviathan, what swims beneath the skin of the world. Part 3, what the deep knows. There's a theological argument that's old, contested, yet never fully resolved, about whether the 7 deadly sins are 7 separate things or 7 expressions of one singular thing: lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, pride, envy. The medieval church organized them hierarchically. Pride is the apex, the root sin, the sin from which all others grew. Dante arranged them in his purgatory as a mountain to be climbed, each level a sin to be purged before the soul could ascend. Pride was at the base, and envy on that second terrace just above it. Pride is the foundation. Envy, the first fruit of pride, the natural consequence of a self so invested in its own worth that the worth of others becomes intolerable. But there's another reading in which envy is not the child of pride, but rather its twin, in which the two are not parent and offspring, but two faces of the same disfigurement. Pride saying, "I am more," and envy saying, "They have what should be mine." Both statements issuing from the same wound, the same fundamental failure to be at peace with the terms of one's own existence. And I had a lot of time to think about that on the third morning. Gordon had been gone for 2 hours. The sky had begun its reluctant brightening, that same gray pewter color arrival of light that had been characterized by the second morning, as though the sun were ashamed to look directly at what the Pacific had done and was approaching it sideways. The 4 of us that remained were arranged on what was left of our cluster. 2 main sections now lashed together, my piece and Bethany's rebuilt cushion platform, and the remaining section of seat track housing that Priya had been using. The cluster was smaller and lower in the water than it had been, not catastrophically, but enough to register, enough to feel the difference between the night before and now, enough to feel that we were running out of things to lose. Carson had not spoken since Gordon. Not a word, not since the screaming had stopped. He sat on Bethany's section with his knees pulled to his chest, his eyes fixed on the middle distance with the particular vacancy of a young man whose nervous system has filed a report and is waiting for the rest of his brain to process it. Bethany sat beside him, not touching him, but close, maintaining proximity the way you maintain proximity to something fragile, with a care that doesn't announce itself. Priya sat beside me on my section, and we talked. We talked because talking was the only thing we could do for Gordon now, not for his memory that would come later, in the world above the horizon, if we made it there. But no, we were talking for ourselves, the kind of talking that was a structure, a kind of insistence that we were still here, still thinking, still in possession of the faculties that differentiated us from the things that happened to us. The pattern, I said. It took the outer section both times, the most exposed piece. Yes, Priya said. It's methodical. Yes. That's not predatory instinct, I said. That's not ambush behavior, that's strategic, she said. The word sat between us. Strategic, implying calculation, implying something that looked at our cluster and understood its structure, targeted its weakness, implying a mind. How intelligent, I said. Not a full sentence. She understood it. She was quiet for a moment, the precise, measured quietness of someone assembling what they know and what they're willing to say. The largest known cetaceans have demonstrated problem-solving, tool use, cultural transmission of learned behaviors across generations, she said. Sperm whales have a region of the brain with no identified analog in other species. Giant squid have nervous systems of extraordinary complexity, and those are species we know about. The ones that surface, the ones that come within range of observation. She paused. Whatever is beneath us has been below that range of observation for, geological time, millions of years, in an environment where the selective pressures are collectively and completely different from anything we've ever studied. Where the ocean's darkness would put extraordinary pressure on non-visual intelligence, on spatial reasoning, on an understanding of the world through pressure and current and vibration. Another pause. There is no reason, none, to assume that something has existed for that long in those conditions will be less intelligent than we are. Well, there's a reason to assume it might be more, I said. Yes, she said quietly. There is. The water beneath us performed its slow ceremony. The surface shift, the pressure wave, the debris field turning. The Leviathan and its patient circling. Closer now. The intervals shorter. The pressure signatures larger and more distinct. As though it had been deciding that the time of subtlety had passed. As though it had assessed us and found us diminished and was adjusting its approach accordingly. It knew Gordon was gone, I was certain of that. Whatever senses it used to map the world, pressure, vibration, thermal, electromagnetic, senses we don't have names for because we'd never needed to develop them above the 5% where we lived. It knew that one of those 5 warm shapes on its surface had been removed, and it was recalibrating. It was recalibrating the way an intelligent thing recalibrates. I want to talk about the Tuesday after the conference room incident. The Tuesday 3 days before the plane departed from Portland. I'd spent the intervening days in a state of interior weather so turbulent, so constant, I began to lose the distinction between what I was feeling and what I was thinking. The emotions had colonized my cognition so thoroughly I could no longer construct a clear thought about the Marcus situation, the Renata situation, or the question of what I was going to do about either without that cold, dark thing immediately flooding it, drowning it in its own particular logic. Everything looked like evidence. Everything felt like betrayal. The world had taken on the specific awful texture of a place that was managed by an enemy. And I had done the thing that people in that state almost always do, which is the thing most guaranteed to make it worse. I looked at Renata's phone. Not systematically, not a planned investigation, but a moment of opportunity when she'd left it on the kitchen counter while she went to answer the door. The screen was still lit. The most recent notification was visible. It was a text, and the preview showed 3 words on it before it dimmed. 3 words I had seen without intending to. Can't wait to. The contact name was visible too. Just a first name. Marcus. 3 words in the name, and the cold dark thing had taken them and built a cathedral out of them. A vast, vaulted, elaborately detailed cathedral of implication, accusation, certainty. All from 3 words in a name, all in 6 seconds before Renata came back to the kitchen. I said nothing. She'd pick up the phone, glanced at whatever the notification was, typed something brief, set it down again, and gone back to whatever she was doing. Her face gave me nothing, but by then my faculty for reading her face without distortion had been compromised for weeks. I couldn't trust my own perception. I knew I couldn't trust it. And knowing you can't trust your own perception while simultaneously being unable to stop using it, it's one of those more exquisite tortures available in the human mind. And I had said nothing. That night I had lain awake next to her. She'd been asleep for about an hour on her side, facing away from me. She always did that. She'd always done, and simply how she slept and had never once signified anything, and I stared at the ceiling of our bedroom and the craftsman bungalow and conducted the trial. In my head, in the dark, with no jury and no defense, I had tried that case, presented the evidence, and I had already reached a verdict, all in the space of 2 hours while the woman I loved slept 12 inches away from me, entirely ignorant of what was happening on the other side of the bed. The evidence, the rooftop party, the laugh, the text notification, and the name, the way she'd said that thing Marcus does, as though his habits were familiar. The fact that she'd looked slightly too composed when I'd mentioned him, which meant she was managing her reaction, which meant there was something to manage there. The fact that she'd looked too slightly natural when I mentioned him on another occasion, which meant she was performing naturalness, which meant, you see how this works? You see the spiral, the machine of it? How it converts every input into the same output. How innocence and guilt produce identical evidence inside the architecture of envy. Because the architecture of envy is not designed to evaluate. It's designed to convict. I had reached my verdict somewhere around 2 a.m. And then I'd lain there with the verdict and felt the absolute desolation of it. Not the satisfaction of having figured something out, discovered something. Not even the sharp, clean pain of genuine betrayal. But that hollow, nauseating awareness that I might have manufactured the entire cathedral from 3 words and a name, and the hunger of my own insecurity. That I was a man lying awake beside someone he loved, destroying what he had with his bare hands through his own mind, and the destruction was the only thing he could think of to do with the fear. I'd never told Renata any of this. I got up the next morning, made coffee, handed her a mug, and sat with her on the back porch while Copernicus moved through the yard. She held the mug with both hands, thumbs overlapping. Said something about the gallery show, something about the weather turning, and I sat there with that verdict still warm in my chest and the cold, dark thing drinking its breakfast, and I said nothing. And 3 days later, I was on the plane. 3 days later, I was in the water. The flashback released me back into the gray third morning. I found Priya watching me with the attentiveness of someone who's learned to read the silences of people around them. "You were somewhere else," she said. "Home," I said, which was both true and not true, the way most things were by then. "Tell me about home," she said. It was not therapeutic, practical, information gathering, the same way she gathered everything, understanding what she needed to understand, the man she was surviving with. So I told her, not the verdict, not the cathedral, not the trial. I wasn't ready for all of that yet, and the third morning on the open Pacific, that was not the time or place for it, but I told her about Renata, about the clay and the eucalyptus smell, the laugh that reached her eyes, the back porch and the coffee, and Copernicus conducting his daily survey of the yard, about the bungalow I'd been slowly, lovingly rebuilding, the original windows I'd restored, the floors I'd refinished, the kitchen I'd redesigned, all of it done with a care that was more than about property value. It was about the investment of a man who believed in this place, and I was making it home. I wanted it to be worthy of the life that I was putting into it. "She sounds like someone worth getting back to," Priya said. "She is," I said. "And the colleague, Marcus." "Marcus." She said the name simply without inflection. "What are you going to do about Marcus?" I looked at the water, the flat gray Pacific morning, the long dark swells, the pieces of debris from the aircraft still scattered across the surface and a radius around us, turning slowly in whatever current had us. Foam, luggage, the sad flotsam of 63 interrupted lives. "I don't know," I said. "I'll say something, I suppose. Have the conversation I should have had 3 months ago. Tell him clearly that the work is mine, that I expect that to be reflected in how it's presented." I paused. "If I get back." "When?" Priya said without emphasis. when I get back. And Renata? I was quiet for a long time. A swell lifted us and set us down. Trust her? I said finally. Stop the trial, stop collecting evidence for a verdict I decided before the evidence was in. I paused. I've been doing to her what Marcus has been doing to me in a way. Taking something and remaking it into my own image without her permission. Taking her love and reframing it as something suspect. Taking her loyalty and prosecuting it. The words came out slowly with the specific resistance of things that have been kept in for too long. That's the thing about envy. It doesn't stay in one place. You let it in for one reason and it moves through the whole house. Pryor was quiet for a moment, then, that's a very self-aware thing to say for someone who's been awake for 60 hours on a piece of aircraft. Well, I've had a lot of time to sit here and think it over. We all do. We all have time here. She looked out at the water. I think the creature knows it. I turned to her. Knows what? What we're all carrying, she said. What each of us has. Gordon had his grief. His wife died 3 years ago. He told me while you were sleeping that first afternoon he'd never found a way to carry it. That just didn't hollow him out, he said. That's what he told me. He talked about the grandbaby as though it were the only light he still has on in the house. She paused. Carson has his guilt about the friend who died, about being the one who didn't know how bad it was, about still being alive and going on the trip anyways. She paused again. Bethany has her failure, the marriage she couldn't save, the life she hadn't made her own yet. She booked that solo vacation because she realized she'd stopped knowing who she was without someone else providing the structure. And me? I asked. You have your hunger, she said simply. The wanting that became consuming. The love that became surveillance. She looked at me steadily. The envy. And you, I said after a moment, what do you have? She smiled briefly, the first smile I'd seen from her, small, slightly painful. Well, ambition, it's become isolation, she said. The work became the only real relationship I had. And at some point the work stopped being enough and I didn't know how to fix that. So I went further into the work. 10 years of field work and I can count the people I'm genuinely close to on one hand. And I've still got fingers left over. She looked out at the water. 5 years studying coral reefs. I have an intimate understanding of the most biodiverse ecosystems on Earth. And I am profoundly alone. Pride, I said. She raised an eyebrow. That's your sin, I said. Not judgment, just Dante's mountain. Pride, then envy, then sloth. She said quietly. The failure to move toward what matters. We both looked at each other. On the gray thing, on that third morning, two damaged and frightened and increasingly clear-eyed people floating on the debris of their interrupted lives, and something passed between us. I don't know I have a precise word for it or not. Not romantic. This was not that. The water was not a place for that, even if it had been. It was the recognition that passes between two people who have told each other true things, which is rarer and more valuable than almost any other form of human exchange. If it knows what we carry, I said, then it's not just a predator. No, she said. It's not just a predator. What is it? She looked at the water long, the way she always looked at things when she was about to say something careful. In the deepest trenches, she said, where the pressure is enough to crush a submarine, where there's no light and no warmth and no food source that we can readily identify. Somehow, life exists, not despite the conditions, but because of them. Things have evolved to fill every possible niche, to turn every possible form of energy into life. Heat from hydrothermal vents, chemical energy from methane seeps. She paused. What if there is something that feeds on a different kind of energy? Not thermal, not chemical. Something that, in a way that certain deep-sea creatures can detect the faintest electrical fields of other organisms. They can detect those fields generated by certain kinds of human psychology, maybe? By the particular emotional frequencies of envy, I said. Of all sins, she said. But perhaps envy most of all, because envy is the hungriest, because it generates the most energy, because it's the most constant, the most self-sustaining, the most... She stopped. The most like something that lives in the dark. Yes, she said. The most like something that lives in the dark. We sat there with that for a while, the water breathing. Well, then it found us, I said. Not because of the crash, not because we happened to come down its territory. Oh, it found us, she said. It found us because of what we're carrying. It smells us, I said. From 3 miles down, she said. Yeah. Carson broke at mid-morning. Not suddenly, nothing breaks suddenly, not really. What looks like a sudden break is always the visible endpoint of a process that's been happening invisibly for a long time. The crack that appears in the wall being the final announcement of a structural failure that was weeks in the making. Carson had been failing since the first night. The shaking had never stopped, not fully, not even when the surface was calm and the creature was at depth and there was technically nothing immediately threatening and visible. The shaking was not fear anymore. It had become something more systemic, the body's continuous processing of an overload that the mind was refusing to acknowledge. He went into the water without warning, not jumped, didn't stand, didn't announce anything, simply rolled off the edge of Bethany's cushioned platform in one fluid motion, the way a sleeper rolls over, the way a body does something the mind hasn't fully approved yet. He was in the water, 4 feet from the edge of the wreckage before any of us understood what was happening. And by the time that I was reaching over the other side, he was 10 feet out, face down, not swimming, just floating, just lying there, face down in the Pacific Ocean in the attitude of a man who's decided, at least for this moment, not to fight the water. Carson! I reached. He was too far. Carson, look at me! He turned his head slightly, his face half submerged. It was almost peaceful. The shaking had stopped. That was the most frightening thing. The shaking that had been his constant for 60 hours had simply ceased, as though he'd reached a decision that resolved the physical conflict. She said, "You're okay, honey," he said, the water filling his mouth slightly on the words. He turned his face away, then back. She just kept saying it. She was still saying it when the water... He stopped. She was trying to help me. She died trying to help me. I know, I said. Carson, just give me your hand. I just keep thinking about Jake, he said. Jake, his friend from Columbus, the one who the trip was for, the one who died in the spring. I keep thinking Jake would have... He would have been better at this. Jake was brave. He was the brave one. I was always the one who... Carson! Bethany's voice beside me, cutting through with a precision that I've always believed saved his life in that moment. Not warm, not pleading, precise. Carson Reeve, look at me right now. He looked at her. You are 22 years old, she said. You have been in the South Pacific Ocean on a piece of aircraft for 2 nights, and you have not let go once. You've not let go once. She held his gaze with a steadiness I found extraordinary. Jake would have been proud of that. Whatever you think of yourself, whatever you've decided about who's brave and who isn't, you have been here. You have been here every single minute. A long silence. The water moved. Something deep and cold shifted beneath us, and I felt it through the whole of the wreckage, and I looked at Priya. She had felt it also. Give me your hand, I said to Carson, quietly but urgently. He reached up. I grabbed his wrist with both hands and pulled, and Bethany grabbed my belt to anchor me. Carson came up over the edge of the wreckage with the weight and the limpness of someone who's genuinely used everything they have and is just running on reserves and they don't quite believe are even still there. He sat on the cushioned platform and breathed. Bethany sat beside him and put her arm around his shoulders, which surprised me. She was not, I had thought, a person who was touchy. But Carson leaned into it, and they sat like that for a while the third morning as it continued its gray and different progression. Priya was beside me, and she said nothing, but her hand was on my arm. She was looking at the water with the expression that I had come to recognize as her professional face meeting something that her profession had not prepared her for. It came closer just now, she said very quietly, only so I could hear. I know. When he went in the water. I know. I kept my voice low. I think it responded to him. Yeah, to what he was feeling, she said. To the guilt, I said. It feeds on all of it, she said. All the sins, but ours most. Yours. She looked at me. Whatever it is, whatever this thing has been doing in the deep for however long, it's been drawn here by something it recognizes, something it resonates with, something it finds familiar. She paused. Wyatt, it's going to come for Carson next. I think it's been working from the outside in. Most exposed first, most spiritually exposed. That's not a scientific... No, she said, it isn't. I looked at Carson, small, wet, breathing on his own cushion, Bethany's arm around him. Then we keep him in the center, I said. We put him in the center and we just keep him there. The third afternoon was the clearest sky we'd had, the clouds finally breaking up, the sun appearing for the first time since the crash and hitting the Pacific with the full force of a South Pacific afternoon, which was both genuinely warming and faintly cruel, the beautiful indifference of weather. We used the mirror that Carson had found, and we used it systematically, Priya running the signaling protocol with the methodical regularity of someone who had done search and rescue training, sweeping the horizon in quadrants, flash, flash, pause. The intentional distress signal again and again into the empty blue afternoon. Flash, flash, pause. Nothing answered. I helped, Bethany helped. Carson, wrapped in the space blanket, watched the horizon with a new quality of attention. Not the blank vacancy of his morning break, but something more present, more directed, as though Bethany's words had reached something that needed reaching and woken up in him. We talked about rescue, actively, specifically, and the way you talk about something when you need to believe in it. The flight plan, the ELT, the fact that Meridian Pacific's operations team would have flagged the missed check-in and initiated the protocol within 2 hours of the flight going dark. The fact that the U.S. Navy maintained its assets through the Pacific Basin. The fact that Australian Maritime Search and Rescue covered this general region under international agreement. The fact that we had been in the water for, Bethany calculated it with the precision she'd applied to everything, 61 hours, which was long and bad and not yet unsurvivable, which was not a great sentence to have to construct, but it was the sentence we had. Priya didn't participate in the rescue conversation. She sat at the edge of the wreckage, and she looked at the water and took readings in the way of someone who has no instruments and is using only what their nervous system and their expertise can tell them. Occasionally she would look at me and I would look at her, and we would communicate the thing that we were not saying in front of Carson and Bethany. The creature had not gone deep. It had been staying shallow all day, holding at a depth that she estimated from pressure signatures, from thermal differentials, from behavior of the surface above it, at no more than 200 or 300 feet, way up from the miles deep domain where it had begun, rising incrementally, acclimating the way a diver acclimates to depth by stages. It was coming closer. At 3:07 p.m. on the third day, I know the time because Bethany had a waterproof watch and had been tracking time with the systemic faith of someone who believes that knowing the exact moment of things is a form of control over them. The Leviathan was visible from the surface in full daylight for the first time. Not as close as the night that I got a look at his eye. Not as clear as I would have wished or dreaded, or both. It was 20 feet below the surface, visible through the water the way something visible through frosted glass is visible. Its outline, its size, readable without the full resolution of detail, which was simultaneously a mercy and a refinement of terror, because you could see the size without seeing the particulars. And the size, visible in daylight and the full revealing cruelty of the Pacific afternoon, was something my mind could not wholly process, and simply rerouted around, filed under an internal category that I can only describe as the thing I will think about later when I am somewhere else. It was longer than the aircraft that had brought us here. I mean, significantly longer. It lay below us, not directly below, but at an angle, its body oriented northeast-southwest, its near end visible beneath our position, and its far end disappearing into the deeper blue beyond the visible range of the daylight penetrating water. It was not moving. It was utterly still, in the way that only things that are confident in their power can afford to be utterly still, the way a mountain is still, the way the bottom of the ocean is still. It was looking up at us. I could feel the eye without seeing it clearly. Could feel it in the way you feel a spotlight on your back as a warmth, a pressure, an attention directed at you with enough specificity to register on the skin. The ancient phosphorescent gaze, muted by 20 feet of water and by daylight, but present, always present. The hunger it contained no less vivid for being filtered. Carson saw it first. He made a sound that was not a word, and I looked at where he was looking, and then we all saw it. All four of us, the full light of the third afternoon. Nobody screamed. I think we had moved past the register where screaming was the appropriate response. What we did was what people do when they look at things the scale of which the eye cannot integrate. We became very quiet and very still. And we held on to whatever was nearest to us, and we waited to see what came next. What came next was nothing for approximately 4 minutes. It simply lay there below us, visible and vast and patient, and we sat above it on our shrinking collection of wreckage, and the Pacific was blue, and the sky was clear, and the sun was warm, and the world was perfectly, savagely beautiful. None of it, though, was on our side. Then it moved. Not toward us, but down and away. A deep, slow arc, the body curving with a grace that was genuinely, horrifically beautiful. the geometry of its surface catching the light as it turned and producing a brief, complex interference pattern in the water above it, prismatic and cold, like light through the world's oldest stained glass. It went down and it went away in 30 seconds that it was gone. Below the threshold of visible and the water above it settled, and the afternoon continued. "It's just playing with us," Carson said, very flatly, very quiet. "No," Priya said. She said it with such conviction that we all looked at her. "It's not playing with us. It's assessing us. It's determining something. And whether we're what it thinks we are, whether what we're carrying is..." She stopped. "Whether we're worth it," Bethany said. "Whether we're what it came up for," Priya said. "It came from 3 miles down," I said. "It came up because of us, because of what we crashed here carrying." I looked at the water. "And every time someone lets go of what they're carrying, Carson in the water this morning being pulled back, Gordon facing it in the dark without flinching," I stopped. "Gordon," Priya said slowly. "Gordon wasn't the most exposed, not spiritually. He was the most structurally important to us, yes, but in terms of what he was carrying," she thought, "the grief. He told me he'd found a way through the grief. He'd said the grandbaby was the light still on in the house. He said he'd stopped being angry about his wife's death, that he'd made his peace with it." She looked at me. "He'd let it go. He was the one among us who actually had let it go." "And it took him first," I said. The logic of that sat on the wreckage with us, ugly and cold, internally consistent. "It took the one who was free," I said, "because the ones who are still holding their poison were the ones it wants." I paused. "We're the ones it's feeding on. Gordon wasn't." I looked at the water. Gordon wasn't food anymore. What does that make the rest of us?" Carson said. "Bait," Bethany said with a clean pragmatism that was her particular form of bravery. "We're bait. We're keeping it here with what we're carrying." Then just let it go," Carson said. His voice was strange, not desperate, but something adjacent to desperate that had moved through into a place beyond it, into a hard, clear brightness. We just let it go. We stop. It's not that simple," I said. I said it because I knew it wasn't. Knew it from 3 months of trying and failing to put the cold, dark thing down, from every morning I'd woken up deciding to trust, and every evening the machinery had started right back up again. "You don't just decide to stop. It doesn't work that way." "Then how does it work?" Carson said. And I found I didn't have an answer. Sitting there in the afternoon light above the Leviathan was perhaps the most honest thing I'd ever thought. Night came for the third time. I've described 2 nights in the Pacific, and I don't want to make this one sound familiar by comparison, because the third night had a quality entirely of its own. A quality I can only attribute to the fact that by the third night we all understood what was happening in a way that the first and second nights had not yet made fully available to us. The first night was pure shock. The second night, survival. The third night was something between confrontation and reckoning, and it had a specific quality that all reckonings have. The sensation of something that cannot be postponed arriving on the schedule it is always kept. There were 4 of us. The wreckage was smaller. We had water for perhaps another 12 hours if we rationed aggressively. And the hydration packs Gordon had brought and Gordon had managed they were gone with him, which was a loss, and practical as well as everything else. We had the mirror, we had the space blanket, we had each other, which sounds insufficient, and was, but also was not. Carson was better than the morning, not recovered. I don't think recovery was available to him on that timeline, but present in the particular way that people become present when they've made a decision, when they've arrived at some internal resolution that settles the shaking and clears the eyes. He had spoken to me in the late afternoon, quietly, out of the earshot of the others, and had said, I'm going to tell his parents, Jake's, when I get home. I've been avoiding them since the funeral. I've been afraid they'd see it in my face, that I knew how bad it was, and I could have said something. I should have said something. He paused. But they deserve to know that he was my best friend, and that I loved him. I think about him every day. They deserve that from me. I've been taking it from them because I was afraid. He said it the way someone says something they've been holding in for a long time, with the relief and the terror of an item finally set down. Okay, I'd said, that's the right thing to do. I know, he said, but I should have already done it. Well, when you get back, I said. When I get back. Something in him settled. Bethany had spoken to Priya that same afternoon in the particular side-by-side configuration of women talking about something real. Not face-to-face, which is confrontational, but side-by-side, looking at the same thing, which is companionable. I hadn't heard what was said, but when they separated, Bethany's posture had changed. In a subtle but unmistakable way, posture changes when something has been braced and finally releases. She sat down for a while with her eyes closed and her face tipped slightly toward the sun, and she looked in that moment like someone who had put something down and was feeling the freedom of empty hands. Priya and I had not yet had the conversation I knew we were moving toward. I could feel it in the way you feel weather. It wasn't here yet, but it was on its way. And the sky had that particular pregnant quality. It came after dark, an hour into the third night, when the creature had begun its ceremony. We'd all felt it and settled into our positions with the practiced adjustment of people who have learned the choreography of their own threat. Tell me what you haven't said, Priya said. I looked at the water. About Renata? Yeah. I told her about the rooftop party, about the 3 months, about the conference room and the hallway, and the verdict reached at 2 a.m. while Renata slept 12 inches away. I told her about the text notifications, 3 words and a name, and about what the machinery had done with it. I told her about the last morning on the back porch, the performance of presence while the hunger ran its calculations in the background. I told her all of it, the whole ugly detailed cathedral of it, floating on the third night in the Pacific with the Leviathan below us, and it was the most honest I had been with another person, about myself, about my failures, and longer than I could account for. When I finished, there was a silence, the good kind. The kind that means someone is taking what you said seriously enough to not immediately feel it. Do you know what Marcus's full text said? Priya asked finally. No, I said. Do you know that it was Marcus's text? I thought about it. No, just a name, Marcus. I paused. There are other Marcuses in the world. Yeah, she said, there are. But even if it was him, she said, you built a cathedral. Yeah, I said, I did. And you prosecuted her without a defense. Yeah. And you called it love. She said, not harshly, precisely. I looked at the water, at the phosphorescent suggestion of the creature below, its cold light dimly visible at depth, its presence as constant and patient as weather. That's what it feeds on, I said. The specific thing, the love that became surveillance, the love that couldn't sustain itself without devouring what I loved. I paused. That's the definition of envy, actually, the theological one. Not just wanting what other has, but wanting to possess what you love so completely that the possession ultimately destroys it. I looked at the water. Envy is the sin that hates the thing it loves. It wants the good thing so badly that it tears the good thing apart by trying to own it. And the Leviathan, Priya said, it's not a creature, I said. It arrived as a certainty, not a hypothesis. The kind of certainty that sometimes comes after long enough in the dark. It's not only a creature. It's what envy looks like when it's 3 miles deep and geologically old and has been feeding on the accumulated hunger of the world since before the world had a name. I stopped. We've been generating it since we were capable of wanting things. Every moment of wanting what someone else has, every act of taking credit, every verdict reached without evidence, every love turned into surveillance. I look back at the water. It's all down there. All of it. And the creature is what it becomes when it has enough. When it has had enough centuries of it to become something with mass. Something with an eye. Priya was quiet for a long time. Then the only way to fight it, she said, is to put it down. I said, whatever we're carrying, put it down. And if we can't, I looked at the water. Then we feed it, I said, until there's nothing left to take. The attack came at midnight. I have tried to write this section more times than I can count, and I failed every time because the event itself resists the linearity of a narrative that it requires. What happened at midnight on the third night happened in approximately 90 seconds, and within those 90 seconds contained more information, sensory, emotional, physical, than my mind has ever been asked to process in a comparable interval. And the result is that my memory of it is not linear, it's layered. It's a series of simultaneous truths that I experience all at once every time I return to it, and can only present here in sequence because that's just the nature of language. The pressure wave came first, the largest we had felt. The surface went briefly vertical around the perimeter of the cluster, a ring of standing water encircling us like a momentary wall, and then collapsed back flat with a sound like the world cleared its throat. Then the eye. Not 20 feet below the surface, not at the surface in the careful exploratory way of the second night. Directly beside the wreckage cluster, level with the surface, close enough that the phosphorescent light of it fell across us like a searchlight, cold and blue-green and ancient, illuminating our small, terrible situation with the disinterested thoroughness of a spotlight on a stage. Carson grabbed my arm. Bethany's hands found the lashing connection of the wreckage and held on. Priya went completely still in the way of someone who has decided that perfect stillness is a decision rather than an absence of decision. The eye was there, 12 feet across, 10 feet from the edge of the cluster, lit from within with the cold fire of something burning at geological temperature, looking at us with the hunger that I recognized, that I now understood was not metaphor, not projection. It was the literal reality of an ancient appetite that I carried a version of in my own chest every single day. It looked at us one by one. I felt this as a pressure, a directional attention that moved from person to person with an intention so clear it bypassed ambiguity entirely. It looked at Bethany. She made a sound, small and involuntary. It looked at Carson, and he gripped my arm harder. It looked at Priya, and she closed her eyes. And then it looked at me. I want to tell you about being looked at by the Leviathan. I want to tell you that I was brave, that I met its gaze with courage that my name implies, that I stared back into that ancient phosphorescent eye without flinching and felt nothing but clarity. But the truth is messier and more important than that. The truth is when it looked at me, I felt recognized. I felt seen in the specific terrible way that only the thing that knows you best can see you. It looked at me, and I felt the cold dark thing in my chest respond. The hunger I'd been carrying for 3 months rising to meet the hunger in that eye, the way a tuning fork responds to a frequency it shares. The two systems resonating, the frequency building between us. It knew me. It had come up from 3 miles down because it knew me. And in the moment of that recognition, I understood, with a clarity that was also a kind of devastation, the full cost of what I'd been carrying, not just the damage to myself, not just the damage to Renata, not just the theft of my own peace, but the full theological cost. The way envy, left to compound, becomes something that exists in the world as a weight, as a force, as a thing with mass and intention and appetite. The way every act of small, private, self-generated hunger, every verdict reached in the dark, every surveillance of a sleeping lover, every thanks said to a thief in a hallway, contributes something larger than itself. The way the private sins are not private, the way they accumulate, the way they go down, the way they feed on what lives in the dark. The eye held me for 3 seconds that lasted a decade. And then it moved. Fast. Faster than any large thing had any right to move. Faster than the water could respond to. The wave it generated in its lunge came a half second after the impact, which meant the impact itself was almost without warning. A massive upward force against the underside of our outer section of our cluster, Carson section. Bethany's cushioned platform, the forward edge of the assembly. Bethany went into the water. Not like Gordon, not pulled down cleanly and finally, but thrown sideways. By the wave the impact generated 8 feet through the air and into the open Pacific beside the cluster. She surfaced immediately because Bethany was the kind of person, and she was swimming back toward us before the wave had fully settled. Swimming with the economical, determined strokes of someone who swims not for pleasure but for transformation. Bethany! I was over the edge. Pride grabbed me. She's swimming. Don't go in. Pride's voice with a force I had not heard from her before. Wyatt, don't go in. Bethany was 15 feet out, swimming hard. Her face was set with the same expression it had worn for 3 days, the face of a project manager assessing the fastest path between the current state and the desired outcome. And she was making progress, and she was going to make it. She was going to make it. The water beneath her went dark. The Leviathan, which had submerged after the impact and had been invisible for 30 seconds of Bethany's swim, was directly beneath her, not moving, positioned with the terrible patience of something that has learned to wait. The phosphorescent shadow bloomed upward through the water column, the cold light of the eye rising toward the surface, and Bethany felt it. She must have felt the thermal shift, the pressure change, because she stopped swimming just for 1 second. She stopped and looked down through the surface of the water and saw what was below her. And for that 1 second, the last second she had, her face was not the project manager's face. It was something else. It was the face of the woman standing on the back porch in the morning, holding the first solo trip she'd ever booked for herself, feeling the first real ownership of her own life, and understanding that the life she was going to live after this was going to be magnificent. She looked at me. When you get back, she said, tell someone you love them in a way that cost you something. Then the open water took her. The sea closed above her without a ripple. I screamed, I don't know for how long. Priya held me, both arms from behind, the grip of someone preventing a drowning. Carson was saying something I couldn't hear, and the water was perfectly, obscenely still where Bethany had been. The phosphorescent light fading below the surface, retreating to the depths with what it had taken. 3 of us. The wreckage smaller, the night immense, the dark, and the breathing. I don't remember the hours between Bethany's death and the dawn of the 4th day clearly. I have fragments. Carson's voice close and steady talking. I don't remember what about. Priya's hands making the small adjustments of a person managing the structural needs of survival without stopping to feel anything yet. The water, the eternal water, the long dark swells, the phosphorescent traces of the creature's movement below us, visible occasionally through the surface as a cold, faint shimmer, a reminder and a warning and presence. I remember thinking about Bethany, about what she'd said. Tell someone you love them in a way that costs you something. Not the easy kind of love. Not the love that costs you nothing, that you perform without risk and that you execute without dropping your defenses. But the love that costs. The love that requires you to put down what you're holding and stand open-handed in front of someone else's judgment. I had never done that. I had loved Renata in the safe way. The way that kept the exit available, the way that maintained the internal audit, kept the calculation running, preserved the option to retreat behind the verdict if the vulnerability became too much. I'd never stood in front of her and says, "This is what I'm afraid of. This is the ugly thing I carry. This is how I have failed to trust you. This is what I need help with." I'd performed the trustworthy partner while conducting the secret prosecution. And the performance had been good enough to fool both of us for 3 years. That was the cost of envy. Not Marcus, not the conference room, not even the cold dark thing itself, which was the symptom. The cost was the love I had not fully given because I had been too afraid that giving it fully meant giving it up. The cost was 3 years of mornings on the back porch with something held back. And the Leviathan below me, ancient and vast and patient, had been feeding on the held back thing, had been feeding on it from 3 miles down, had known before the plane hit the water what it was going to find when it surfaced. I looked at the water. "I see you," I said quietly, not feeling brave, not defiant, just clear, just honest, the way you're honest at the end of something. When the pretenses have been stripped off by 60 hours on the ocean and a creature of geological age eating your companions, and the slow, devastating work of actually understanding what you've been doing your entire life. "I see what you are." The water breathed. "And I know what I have to do," I said. The 4th morning came, 3 of us, the Pacific indifferent and blue, the horizon empty as it had been for 3 days, and on it, at the edge of the horizon, so small I thought it was a mistake, a hallucination generated by hope and dehydration, specific cruelty of the open ocean which shows you things that aren't there. It was a shape, a moving shape, a shape that resolved over the course of 15 minutes that felt like 15 years into a vessel, a ship, an Australian Maritime Patrol vessel as it turned out, responding to the recovered ELT signal from the wreckage of Pacific Meridian Flight 2247, which had been broadcasting for 3 days from a position approximately 400 miles northwest of Vanuatu, which had been complicated to locate because the ELT had sustained damage in the crash and had been transmitting intermittently, which explained the delay, which the rescue coordinator explained to me on the deck of the vessel while I sat wrapped in a thermal blanket, drinking the most significant cup of tea in my life. None of this mattered at the moment I saw the shape on the horizon. What mattered at the moment I saw the shape on the horizon was Carson grabbing the mirror and beginning to flash it with the systemic practice motion of someone who's been ready to do this for 3 days. What mattered was Priya making a sound that I'd never heard from her before and I would never forget. A brief, unguarded, wholly unprecise sound, the sound of a person who'd been rigidly managing something for 72 hours and releasing it all at once. What mattered was that I looked at the water one more time before I did anything else. The Leviathan was below us, still there, holding at a depth. It was still watching, but the phosphorescent eye, when I looked through the surface searching for it, seemed dimmer, seemed deeper than it had been. seemed to be slowly, with the patience of something that has all the time to work with, retreating, descending back toward the trench, back toward the basin floor, back toward the dark. Not because it had been defeated, because I had put the thing down, because I had seen it clearly and called it what it was and understood the cost and decided on the gray fourth morning, floating on what was left of the plane above the 95%, that I was done feeding it, that I was going home, that I was going to stand in front of Renata with empty hands and an honest account of what I had been doing in the dark, and that this was going to cost something real, and that real cost was the only currency that mattered. The Leviathan descended, and we flashed the mirror until the ship changed its heading and came towards us.